religion, with its core belief of genitally mutilating all its male boys at 8 days old, is getting a museum in the centre of Lisbon, Portugal. If mums and dads don't have their 8-day-old baby circumcised, then they'll never go to heaven. It sounds so pre-pagan, and it probably would be claimed to be. It's claimed that Jewish people have been in the region of Portugal since they left Jerusalem in 70 AD. 500 or 400 AD. Sources would have Jewish people in the city of Lisbon. That was part of Greater Iberia then. But it's around 1509 when the Passover and Christian Easter were very close together, and there was a pogrom. And some Jews that didn't want to convert into crypto-Jews, and those that didn't escape to the colonies, were burned in a Spanish Inquisition type thing. That's the main reason why we're including this story with Lisbon. There's an area in Lisbon called Alfama, and within Alfama there was a Jewish quarter, as well as some other areas of Lisbon. I could equally be talking to you about Belmonte, or Evora, or Elvas, Castella David. These are often small family groups with a few converted slaves. They might be Ashkenazi or Sephardic. The Knights Templar controlled this landed border country, but the Jewish population traded by sea routes to their extended family networks in North Africa, Turkey, both sides of the Muslim-Christian divide when they were in conflict. And then with the new lands in the far-flung colonies of the controlled Seven Oceans, little more than port enclave communities that brought that most portable of commodities, people, slave trading, sex trafficking. The Portuguese were perhaps the world's first global sex tourists, and perhaps straying close to Hogarth's, the English artist's view of Jewish people at that period of time in London, which was quite Harvey Weinstein-like. I've noticed that he's had some very expensive lawyers quash one of his convictions because it was a bit emotive, apparently. But is it any wonder if a boy child goes through a genital mutilation ceremony where the religious leader uses his mouth to antiseptic and take away any blood? Circumcision without the full bepe, as it's called. If you don't do it, mums and dads, never go to heaven. Is it any wonder that Harvey Weinstein turns out like Harvey Weinstein? Entertainment industry rather than in the military, in America being a usual career choice. The flamboyance and desperate enthusiasm of it all there to be exploited. Hogarth explains something about always feeling inadequate, always needing more but never being able to achieve that which has been made more empty. It's not a big stretch to relate this to the genital mutilation of a child that's 8 days old. Jesus Christ would have gone through the same process. Why is it always that the abused becomes the abuser? Why is it always that the genocided becomes the genocider? Is that genocidee becomes the genocider? Do pogroms happen for a reason? And is it in any way related to the activities and choices that get biased by the fallout of having an 8-day-old child genitally mutilated with full bepe? Child abuse victims have problems. Others get to the top. Now, all three types of Semitic peoples are circumcised, but the two other, the Persian Semitic peoples and the Arab Semitic peoples, have their children circumcised before puberty, at an age when they've got something of their mental capacity to choose. Other tropical cultures circumcise their children when they are babies, a few months to a few years old, Basically, when they're young enough to not remember it, goes the thinking, and you wouldn't want to, would you? It's only the Jewish Semitic people that circumcise their 8-day-old children with full bepeh. Semitic just means coming from the Golden Crescent. I always worry when I hear the phrase anti-Semitic. It's like trying to claim that in the future there is only going to be one type of Semitic. We are going to eradicate all the Persians. We are going to eradicate all the Arabs, who both have equal claim to being Semitic people. I'll look at Hogarth's Georgian England point of view some other time. But the ultra-Zionist, extremist propaganda that the Israeli people have been subjected to by an ultra-right-wing Israeli government that have completely overturned the guarantees that were given to Yasser Arafat about a tunnel from Gaza to the West Bank, a road corridor, and instilled a subhuman type point of view on the Israeli population's view in the media of the Palestinian neighbours. Israeli settlers in the West Bank behaving like they don't have no mamas. And it's all for real estate profit. I'm not really telling you anything that's a secret. It was something that I've been unaware of for many years. But it is something that's glossed over with huge amounts of fluff and padding and wordage elsewhere to try and get some sense of unity identity with Christians. Of course, the Catholics, when they pushed the more Arabs back into Africa, out of Iberia, and the Jewish population were still trading with both sides. They shouldn't have been burning people, but as far as I know, it wasn't 30,000 in 6 months, like has been happening in Palestine. Perhaps we need to stop the genital mutilation process that helps contribute to the psychological disorder. How long are we going to close our eyes and close our minds to it when it should be as big as Black Lives Matter and female genital mutilation? More prevalent in a different type of culture that's less internationally coercive. In any civilised country, parents shouldn't be able to consent to having religious leaders mouth around their 8-day-old child's penis.
I know the smallest voices, they can make it major. I only see my goals, I don't believe in failure.
I have a strong sense of empathy, and I'm a reflecting person. I'm desperately grasping for anything beyond initial disgust at First Testament thinking. But it's First Testament belief, not thinking. I think, therefore I am. Slaughter your firstborn child and abuse your other children forevermore isn't thinking. Parent believers given the responsibility to act for their babies against all legal precedent, hugely tenacious legal representation and placement within secular authorities, and then justification because of the justification of the secular authority. And it's big business. Antiseptic herbs were known in ancient Egypt, and every time since, though they perhaps weren't necessarily accessible at all times if you're a slave building pyramids or something. Ancient Egypt, was much more humid and tropical than it is now. The smells carry in hot and dry much more, but in humid places, bacteria thrive. It's an instruction when you're going through IVF not to have oral sex because the saliva is a slight spermicide as well as an antiseptic. Perhaps some individuals need the desensitization over time so that they're not TWC Weinstein-esque habitually affected. Or perhaps the cause and effect works inversely. By exposure and desensitization, other passions are brought to the fore. Ambitions, intrigue, and sort of gallows humour. How does such a prehistoric practices persist? Perceived needs or necessities from thousands of years ago might be needed again for some post-apocalyptic future like the walk. So there might be pogroms in the future, there might be zombies in the future, so prehistoric practices are taught and maintained as survival wisdoms, not to be forgotten at any cost. The cost is pogroms. Not to be forgotten, but the past is there to be learned from. I've got a friend, I know that's hard to believe, I'll get to that later actually, in the Philippines, a tropical country, the government has for generations had a summer special offer. You bring your son to hospital and we'll have him circumcised for you. Pretty much like a public health campaign. Street children don't have the facilities for washing perhaps, and bacteria and the like, and transferring things to women. Now, in some ways, American approach to healthcare for some can be similar to a developing world country, but huge numbers of American boys are circumcised more or less at birth as part of a healthcare package by First Testament ethos hospitals. There are ways where this is easily reversible and very difficult to reverse. Too much reversing meant that some Jewish leaders decreed that there was insufficient cutting if the second layer wasn't irreversibly cut. In the Philippines and South Sea Island cultures, it's commonplace to make a butterfly-type incision in the top, and often has been the culture of a incision on the underside into the urethra that causes much more significant interventions. What happens to these foreskins that are removed in American hospitals? They are extremely valuable to women's face cream industry. In a laboratory, they can be regrown to many times their original size. Meters squared of foreskin can be produced from one. Wonderful if it's used for burns victims, skin grafts and the like, but sold for $100,000 to cosmetic face cream manufacturers. It sort of accounts for the prevalence of the practice in modern day America. Certainly not all Semitic cultures have circumcised at 8 days old as a fundamental commandment of their religion. Muslims usually wait for some sort of informed decision before or after puberty. The decision of the parents for the child, abuse of the child doing this, is only really a First Testament culture thing. The consenting of parents to child abuse of their own child through belief goes much further than just the cutting. Israel Orthodox and American Orthodox Jewish families have the mother pass the child to the father and a godparent give the child to the moa, often a rabbi, often a surgeon, just doing it for a hobby. Bepeh. The parents hand the baby child over to be abused in front of the face. The religious leader then makes the circumcision and sucks clean blood to where she has made the incision with their mouth. It's something that's come to my attention again. Whenever I've learnt of this before, I've wanted to not believe it and I've wanted to quickly forget it. The religious leader sucks the baby child's little bepeh. This is something that the child will never go to heaven. Whatever they do in their life, they won't go to heaven unless this happens. This is fundamental and centric to the religion, and certainly the Orthodox. And it is fundamentally child abuse, and routinely courts in America choose to think otherwise. Whether you hit your child is one thing, that's child abuse, but having someone work on your baby child's bepeh is up for debate, apparently. In 1972 and much more recently, there's been a fair few instances of a Moa religious leader giving herpes to the baby child of a religious persuasion in the state authority and judicial system, leads to a folding of prosecution under sustained legal protection and veracity of organised public opinion, even using the horrors of survivors of the Holocaust as a indicator of it could happen again because it has happened before, that objections have been raised to this religious child abuse and resulted in pogroms and Holocaust, rather than that Bepe exists and is still carried out might possibly be the reason for the pogroms and Holocaust in some small way, not an indicator that it might happen again. Now, for Jewish burial, circumcision on a dead child that dies before the 8 days needs to be carried out on the corpse. I'm unclear as to whether Bepe occurs, the sucking occurs on the corpse by the religious leader.
And if we don't meet before I leave, I hope I'll see you later. Once I was 20 years old, my story got told. I was frightened by everything I saw before me. Once I was 20 years old.
I had a friend that used to cross streams at the toilet bowl with his brother, like something with lightsabers out of Star Wars. And when those flows of urine collide, it splashes outside of the bowl, and squeals could be heard, and father had to join in. The younger child, as is still his way, had a ease to pulling back his foreskin. When the older child was spraying, like when you first turn a hose on and it goes out at all hours of the clock. So father says that you must pull back your foreskin. This is a point that's laboured, and it's intensely painful for this particular child. This is 4 or 5 years old. I'm sure it would have happened in its own time for each individual person's own need. But for the parents' insistence that this must be done, he didn't want to try because it was so intensely painful. They consulted a doctor, and the doctor was very experienced at this and sort of did it as a hobby at times. There was a consultation with the doctor and the parents, and the child of reasonable mental capacity, but not anything that couldn't really be influenced by a Mars bar, probably. The doctor did explain that it would probably happen in its own time. He could do the operation. While I'm here after the examination, why might I want to have it done? It can help people be more ambitious and concentrate on other things. It will be painful for quite a while. Why is the father insisting that the pulling back of the foreskin by the child must be done? It mustn't necessarily be done. The protective hutch over the lower half of the torso for a long time after in the hospital is well remembered to keep the sheets from touching the very sensitive, newly circumcised purple end. And then again, bedridden at home with a similar sort of device of cushions that wasn't as effective. Bedridden for a similar period of time as measles or mumps. The same parents sending the child to measles parties of children and mumps parties of children to get it over with. The same wisdoms were criminalised in COVID.
I got my boys with me, at least those in favor. Once I was 7 years old. So I started writing songs, I started writing stories. Once I was 20 years old. Once I was 20 years old, my story got told. Story